For over 1,000 years, nobody knew what was beneath the Colosseum. After the fall of Rome, the underground chambers were deliberately buried under 40 feet of earth and rubble. All memory of their existence was erased. Then in 1813, Italian archaeologists attempted the first excavation. They broke through ancient stone walls and started descending into the darkness. Within days, they had to stop. Groundwater flooded the tunnels, forcing them back. They tried again in 1874. Same result. The earth itself seemed determined to keep Rome's secrets buried. It wasn't until the 1930s when Mussolini ordered a complete excavation as part of his campaign to glorify classical Rome that workers finally cleared the underground chambers for good. And what they found down there changed everything historians thought they knew about the Colosseum. This isn't speculation. The chambers are still there, preserved beneath the most famous monument of the ancient world. Modern archaeological teams using cutting-edge technology have mapped every tunnel, every room, every hidden passage. And the more they discover, the more disturbing the picture becomes. Because the Colosseum wasn't just an arena for gladiatorial combat. It was the visible tip of a massive underground machine designed for purposes that Rome never fully documented in writing. What I'm about to show you is based on decades of archaeological research, confirmed by physical evidence, and supported by the writings of Romans who witnessed these events firsthand. But before we descend into the Hypogeum, the labyrinth beneath the arena floor, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, hit subscribe because we're exposing the history they tried to bury, literally. Now, let's talk about what archaeologists actually discovered in the Colosseum's underground chambers. And I warn you, the truth is darker than any Hollywood movie. The Hypogeum is enormous. It covers the entire footprint of the arena floor, roughly 6 acres of underground space organized into 3 distinct levels. The engineering is breathtaking. When German archaeologist Heinz-Jürgen Best began systematic excavations in the 1990s, he discovered that the Romans had built 80 separate elevator shafts powered by 60 massive capstans. These weren't simple pulley systems. They were sophisticated hydraulic mechanisms that could raise cages containing lions, bears, and other animals from the underground directly onto the arena floor through trapdoors. The effect for the audience above was pure theater. One moment the arena was empty. The next, a tiger materialized as if by magic, emerging from the earth itself. But here's what modern archaeologists have realized. The mechanical systems, impressive as they are, only account for about 60% of the underground space. The elevator shafts, the animal cages, the equipment storage areas, these are concentrated in specific sections of the Hypogeum. The remaining 40% serve different purposes. And it's these other chambers, the ones that didn't have mechanical functions, that tell the real story of what the Colosseum was designed to do. The Hypogeum wasn't part of the original construction. When Emperor Vespasian built the Colosseum beginning in 72 AD, the arena floor was solid ground. The underground complex was added later, under Emperor Domitian, who ruled from 81 to 96 AD. Domitian was obsessed with spectacle. He wanted games that would surpass anything Rome had ever seen. So he ordered the construction of an entire hidden world beneath the arena. The project took years and employed thousands of workers, many of them slaves. And when it was finished, Rome had created something unprecedented, an underground city designed to support and enhance the horrors happening above. Let me describe what's actually down there based on archaeological surveys. The Hypogeum is organized around a central corridor running the length of the arena. 12 curved passageways branch off from this main corridor, creating a pattern that archaeologists describe as resembling the spokes of a wheel. These passages are lined with chambers of varying sizes. Some are large, clearly designed for holding multiple animals in cages. Others are smaller, more confined. The walls are masonry, built using opus reticulatum, a Roman construction technique involving pyramid-shaped stone blocks arranged in a diagonal pattern. The ceilings are barrow vaults designed to support the massive weight of the arena floor above. What makes these chambers disturbing isn't just their architecture. It's the evidence of how they were actually used. In 2021, Archaeological teams from Parco Archeologico del Colosseo used LiDAR scanning and 3D mapping technology to create the most detailed reconstruction of a hypogeum ever produced. The scans revealed features that previous excavations had missed. Channels carved into the floors for drainage. Iron fixtures embedded in the walls. Spaces designed not for mechanical equipment or animal storage, but for holding human beings. The scans also revealed something else. Sections of the hypogeum had been modified multiple times over the centuries, with walls added or removed, spaces repurposed, new features installed. The underground chambers evolved as Rome's tastes for entertainment became increasingly extreme. Now, let's talk about who was kept in these chambers and why. We know from Roman historical sources that the Colosseum wasn't just for gladiatorial combat. It was also used for public executions. The poet Martial, who attended games at the Colosseum and wrote detailed accounts of what he witnessed, describes multiple forms of execution. Damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, where condemned prisoners were either tied to poles and attacked by animals or forced to run across the arena while being hunted. Ad gladium, where prisoners were given swords and forced to fight each other in one-sided matches designed to end in death. Crematio or ad flammis, where victims were dressed in clothes soaked with flammable substances and burned alive while being forced to dance as the flames consumed them. These executions happened during what Romans called the meridiani, the midday executions that took place during the lunch break between morning animal hunts and afternoon gladiatorial combat. The elite Romans would leave the Colosseum to eat, while the common people stayed to watch prisoners die in increasingly creative ways. Martial describes these executions with disturbing casualness, as if commenting on the weather. He mentions victims dressed as mythological figures being torn apart by animals as reenactments of famous myths. One prisoner dressed as Orpheus, the legendary musician, was killed by a bear that, as Martial notes with what seems like disappointment, was not charmed by the music. Another execution recreated the myth of Pasiphae in ways that Martial describes, but which are too graphic to detail here. The point is that these executions required preparation. Prisoners had to be held somewhere before being brought into the arena. Costumes had to be prepared. Animals had to be coordinated. The timing had to be precise. And all of this happened in the Hypogeum. The condemned prisoners, many of them women captured during Rome's endless wars of conquest, were kept in the underground chambers, sometimes for days or weeks, waiting for their scheduled executions. What happened to them during that waiting period is something Roman sources rarely discuss. But we can infer from what we know about Roman attitudes toward conquered peoples and enslaved persons. Under Roman law, prisoners of war had no legal rights. They were classified as infames, literally without honor. They could be bought, sold, rented, or killed at the owner's discretion. Female prisoners, captured during military campaigns across the empire, faced specific horrors. Roman writers like Suetonius and Cassius Dio mention in passing that captive women were sometimes distributed as rewards to gladiators who had fought particularly well, or to soldiers who had distinguished themselves in battle. These women would be held in facilities beneath amphitheaters, including the Colosseum, where they could be accessed by those who had been granted what the sources call privileges of victory. We also know from archaeological evidence that the Hypogeum contained living quarters. Not comfortable rooms, but spaces where people could be held for extended periods. The drainage systems carved into the floors suggest these chambers needed regular cleaning. The lack of natural light, the poor ventilation, the dampness from periodic flooding, all of this made the Hypogeum a nightmarish environment for anyone confined there for any length of time. And yet people were confined there, sometimes for weeks, sometimes longer. One of the most disturbing aspects of a hypogeum is a section of corridors and chambers that lead to a gate called the Porta Libitinaria. In Roman mythology, Libitina was the goddess of death and funerals. The gate bearing her name served a specific purpose. It was the exit through which the bodies of dead gladiators were removed from the Colosseum. Attendants dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the dead in Greek mythology, would use a hammer to ritually claim the corpse. Then the body would be dragged through the Porta Libitinaria, through the Hypogeum tunnels, and eventually dumped into the Tiber River. But the gate wasn't just for dead gladiators. Any bodies that needed to be removed from the arena, including executed prisoners, went through this same system. The underground chambers near the Porta Libitinaria show evidence of heavy, prolonged use. The stone floors are worn smooth. The drainage channels show chemical traces consistent with biological decomposition. Archaeological excavations outside the Colosseum have revealed burial pits containing hundreds of human remains, mostly unidentified, dating from the period when the games were at their height. These weren't formal burials with funeral rites. These were disposal sites. The remains show signs of violent death, animal attacks, burning, and other trauma consistent with arena executions. Many of the skeletons are female, ranging in age from adolescence to early adulthood. DNA analysis has shown that these individuals came from across the Roman Empire, Britain, North Africa, Germania, the Middle East. They were brought to Rome as captives, processed through the system, and ultimately discarded like refuse. Here's something that modern researchers find particularly disturbing. The Hypogeum continued to be used long after gladiatorial combat officially ended. In 404 AD, a Christian monk named Telemachus jumped into the arena to stop a gladiatorial fight and was killed by the angry crowd. Emperor Honorius, responding to Christian pressure, banned gladiatorial combat. But archaeological evidence suggests that parts of the Hypogeum remained operational for decades afterward. The ban ended the games, but it didn't immediately end the use of the underground chambers for other purposes. What those purposes were, we can only speculate. But the physical evidence shows continued human activity in the Hypogeum well into the mid-5th century, even as Rome itself was collapsing around the Colosseum. Eventually, the Hypogeum was deliberately buried. Sometime in the 6th or 7th century, as Rome descended into chaos and the Colosseum fell into disuse, someone made the decision to fill the underground chambers with earth and rubble. This wasn't natural decay. It was intentional burial. Archaeologists can tell from the way the fill was deposited that it was done systematically, almost as if someone wanted to seal the chambers permanently. For over 1,000 years, the Hypogeum remained hidden. Medieval Romans living near the Colosseum had no idea that an entire underground city existed beneath their feet. The knowledge was lost completely. When excavations finally reached the Hypogeum in the 1930s, the archaeologists found a time capsule. The chambers had been preserved almost exactly as they were when they were sealed. The elevator mechanisms were still in place. The animal cages still had bones inside. And the smaller chambers, the ones with the worn floors and the drainage channels, still contained traces of the people who had been held there 15 centuries earlier. Modern forensic analysis of residue found in these chambers has revealed the presence of organic compounds consistent with prolonged human habitation under conditions of extreme stress. Today, tourists can visit parts of the Hypogeum on special tours. You descend beneath the arena floor and walk through the same corridors where gladiators prepared for battle, where animals paced in their cages, where condemned prisoners waited for their executions. The tour guides explain the engineering marvels, the elevator systems, the sophisticated hydraulics. They talk about the spectacle of the games, the roar of the crowd, the glory of Rome. What they don't emphasize is what else happened in these chambers. What happened to the people who weren't gladiators, who weren't given weapons or a chance to fight back? The people who were simply inventory, resources to be used and disposed of as the empire saw fit. Most of the Hypogeum remains closed to the public. Large sections are too structurally unstable for regular tourist traffic. But another reason is that some areas contain features that are difficult to explain, difficult to contextualize, and disturbing even to archaeologists who spend their careers studying ancient violence. There are chambers that clearly weren't designed for animals or equipment. There are spaces that served purposes the Romans never documented in writing, perhaps because what happened there was too routine to merit recording, or perhaps because some things were better left unwritten even in an empire as brutal as Rome. The Colosseum stands today as a symbol of Roman engineering and civilization. Millions of people visit every year to marvel at the architecture and imagine the glory of the gladiatorial games. Very few think about what was happening 20 feet beneath their feet, in the darkness of the Hypogeum, in chambers designed to break human beings in ways that left no trace in the historical record. The stones are still there. The drainage channels are still there. The evidence is still there. We just choose not to look too closely at what it means. And that's the real secret of the Colosseum's underground chambers. Not what happened there, but that it was normal, that it was routine, that the same civilization that gave us philosophy and law and engineering also created an industrialized system for processing human suffering on a scale that required 3 levels of underground infrastructure to support. The spectacle in the arena above was theater. The real horror was in the machinery that made the theater possible. And that machinery is still there, preserved in stone, waiting beneath the most visited monument in Rome for anyone willing to see it. If this opened your eyes to something you didn't know, hit subscribe. We're going to keep exposing the history that got buried. Leave a comment with your thoughts. And I'll see you in the next investigation into the darkness beneath the monuments of empire.